Hello and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. Pat, it's finally starting to feel like winter here in the Northeast. I know Montreal is getting pounded by snow. I was talking to a friend up there who mentioned that they're getting 40 centimeters of snow. Of course, I can't do the math off the top of my head. But
I'll do it for you. It's almost 2 feet. It's,
wow,
it's
okay.
it's just more than a foot and a half.
Wow, okay, so we're actually getting weather that's appropriate for this time, and of course that makes sense because we have the Winter Classic coming up, which we're going to get to a little bit later. But considering one of the teams who we just mentioned, their city and their place there, the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers, two teams that were kind of expected to be Cup contenders. Montreal, with the win the other day, did get back atop their division for now. The Rangers, they're coming off of a 5-3 loss against Nashville that wasn't even as close as the score indicated. Pat, which of these teams is in more trouble right now?
It's the Rangers. There's no question, really. The Rangers are in significant turmoil. There's obviously the case with Montreal with the goaltending being a thing. I mean, you look at any sport. I mean, you go to football. You go to any other. You say football. We'll start with there. If the Patriots lost Tom Brady for 6 weeks, they would be in big trouble. And if you look at what Montreal's going through right now, they lost their quarterback, basically the reigning MVP of the league, Carey Price, and Mike Condon's played admirably, but there's no replacing Carey Price. And they could, they put their fingers to clog up the holes in the dam with Condon, and now they traded for Ben Scrivens, which Scrivens he's been serviceable wherever he's gone. He's not been good, but he's been serviceable wherever he's gone. And to try and pick up a second guy because Dustin Tokarski doesn't have it, but you look at Montreal and this is. Let's start by saying they're both flawed right now. Montreal obviously was not going to be the team that, won 9 games straight out of the gate. But they're only 12-14-3 in their last, roughly 30 games. So, I mean, that's 30 games, a pretty strong stretch, and they've been very bad. I think the Rangers have it worse just because there's not help coming. You could say Carey Price is going to come back, and we both know he's going to, whether he's healthy, because he went out once, came back, and then was injured again. Whether this is a lingering problem or not, I mean, either way, Montreal would be in trouble if without Price for a long period of time. But the Rangers have just been downright awful. Basically, since Thanksgiving, they've been downright atrocious. And they're hanging around in the playoff race right now. But if you look at it, Dave, if they fall out of that top 3, fortunately, the top 3 in the Metro is pretty much locked in at the moment. The only problem with that is Pittsburgh's got 2 games in hand on the Rangers. So I don't think the Rangers are going to fall. I don't think the Rangers are going to fall out of playoff contention. But if they fall out of that top 3 in the Metro, they're in big trouble.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny that you bring that up because I think when you look at it at face value, the Rangers and their situation right now, because they're relatively healthy and the goaltending is struggling, the defense is struggling, they're not exactly scoring a ton of goals. I think that in terms of their actual play, you would think they're in more trouble. But for me, I'm going to say Montreal is in more trouble. Not so much because of their situation, but because of the division around them. Where there's 5 teams basically vying for
6.
those. Oh, yeah, so it's true. 6 if you even throw Tampa Bay in there. So 6 teams vying for 3 locked-in spots and then the 2 wild card spots. Where look, we know Carey Price when he's on the top of his game is probably the best goaltender in hockey, but after coming off of these injuries, and they're going to throw him to the fire because they're going to need to win some games quickly. Do we really expect him to be that good right away? I mean, how long is it going to take him to get back? Is it going to take him a week? Is it going to take him a month? And even if that at all. And I think also the thing that our friend Connor McKenna has pointed out in the past, And then that I think is true this year is that sometimes this team gets exposed when the goaltending isn't there.
Mhm.
And sure, they're a team that can score, and they're really good on the rush, but they're not a big team. They're not a team that is going to really just be able to body you and that kind of thing. And Montreal, to me, has their deficiencies. And I don't know if Carey Price is going to come back and be good enough to make that much of a difference right away.
That's a good point, because remember last year we looked at them and they kind of won that division going away. But we had Connor on the show, and everyone pointed to the fact that they were way over. Their point total last year was elevated because of the goaltending, because he masked a lot of things. And I agree with that. You look at what they went through with Alex Semin this year. They took a flyer on him, and he was in and out of the lineup, and then they ultimately terminated his contract. When that team rolls, it rolls four lines. It has 3 lines that can score. Brian Flynn had a big goal in the shootout on Monday night. Their defense gets involved, but Jeff Petrie hasn't done a lot lately. Subban, whatever. But the Rangers, Dave, are 4-10-2 in their last 16 games. 4-10-2. That's 10 points they've picked up in their last, 16 games.
Well, Pat,
16 games is a pretty decent chunk of time. I mean, that's basically since the day before American Thanksgiving. So 10 points in 16 games. I mean, that and everybody who followed it knew that this team had elevated point total the first basically 2 months because of the goaltending and shooting percentage.
Yeah, that's true. And I know you were pointing that out early in the year, that the goaltending, their PDO numbers basically said that they were overachieving because of the goaltending. And I guess my question to you is, considering what we've seen all year from this team, and that the only difference was that the goaltending was so good that they were winning just because of the goaltending, not just from Lundqvist, but even Antti Raanta as well, who was very good at the beginning of the year. Are we seeing basically the same thing from this team, except minus the goaltending? And really the fact is that maybe through 30-somewhat games right now, this team just isn't that good as they're constructed right now.
I would make that case just because first off, we'll start with the fact they're still leading the NHL in PDO. It's just, according to War on Ice, it's just the shooting percentage has gone from like 11% to 9.5%. And to your point, the goaltending has dropped too. Their on ice save percentage is now 93.2, which is if you remember where they were at, they were 956 back a month out. What it was American Thanksgiving, we'll call it roughly. So the goaltending has been a problem, but if you watch this, I watched the Rangers on Monday in Nashville, and you look at the goals that Nashville scored. I mean, you can make these were shots that Lundqvist was stopping at the beginning of the year. I'll give him that. But Ryan Ellis's was a one-timer blast on a power play. Philip Forsberg was a one-timer blast on a power play. So 2 power play goals where there were cross-ice passes on one-timers that Lundqvist couldn't get from side to side. One was a tip where one was an uncovered tip. The deflection could have been ruled high. It was called a good goal, but no one was covering the front of the net there. And one of the goals, James Neal's second goal was was basically a scramble play. And it's just the Rangers defensively have not been good at all. No. And the goaltending is just a function of that. And I mentioned Neal's goal, the one that Lundqvist could have had, but James Neal is a legit sniper in the NHL. And it was a tic-tac-toe play. So if he's tracking the puck, it's from a guy like Mike Ribeiro, who's also an elite playmaker. But where did the play start? It started with a turnover in the offensive zone by Kevin Hayes, who wiped out and couldn't get back. And now Kevin Hayes is starting to bear the brunt of this because he got thrown under the bus Tuesday after practice by Rangers coach Alain Vigneault. Reportedly, according to our buddy Andrew Gross from the North Jersey Record, AV says, quote, "It's a tipping point with Hayes," says he's not worked hard enough this season. And he's been given, quote, "a long leash," according to Vigneault, which, to be fair, he's had to give Hayes a bit of a longer leash because injury to Derek Stepan. But, you watch these teams. You watch the Rangers particularly, and there are just far too many passengers on this side right now. Rick Nash scored a goal on Monday night, but you look at Nash. If you look at Nash's game log thus far this season, Rick Nash, who had an exceptional season last year, 40-plus goals, shorthanded goals, scoring in all situations, in all spots. And if you look at him this year, he has 11 goals. But 8 of those goals, if I'm not mistaken, were in a 6-game stretch in November. One of them was an empty netter. So he's got 3 goals in 29 games outside of a 6-game stretch in November. And, one's an empty netter in which he didn't even score. He was given a goal because of it. So they need more. Offensively, they need more from Hayes. They need more from Kreider. They need more from Nash. Matt Zuccarello and Derek Brassard and Derek Stepan and Oscar Lindberg, they've carried this team for the majority of this season. And they need more guys to get involved offensively. And then also, the defense has just been very bad with Mark Stahl and Dan Girardi. And it's more – you can make the case it's more of an indictment of their personnel decisions and not – you can't – maybe not Jeff Gorton per se because he just took the reins officially in July. Glenn Sather left the cupboard bare here a little bit. And, we talked last year about this year, 2015-16 being the year the window closes, and it may have even been last year.
Yeah, it could be. It's very interesting comparing these two teams because both original 6 franchises, both that have fan bases that really expected this year to be something, especially because Montreal got off to such a hot start, and the Rangers did too.
Both teams, yeah.
Yeah. And then now we're looking at them, and Montreal was hot for a little bit. They had won like 4 games in a row, and then they started to tail off, and they lost games in the division. They lost to Boston, they lost to Detroit, and then they went out, and played some teams in the Western Conference and got throttled. I mean, they lost 5-1 to Nashville, 6-2 to Dallas. Though everyone kind of does that to you. 3-0 to the Kings. The biggest thing is Montreal has struggled to score as well. I mean, you're seeing both of these teams as much as, maybe the goaltending is, even when Price comes back, it'll be good. And even the Rangers as well, that their goaltending will kind of fall back to the pack as it has. I think scoring is the issue for both these teams, that they're not able to find that third goal a lot of nights. And, we always say it's a 3-2 league, and it certainly is in a lot of cases. And I think both teams are struggling. The interesting thing is that there's other teams that are, obviously Washington in the Metro, but there's so many other teams now in the Atlantic that you could make a case that Montreal is really going to struggle to make the playoffs if they can't get it going. Just because, look, a couple of games here and there, and they could be basically out of the playoffs in a week if they don't get it together. I mean, sure, that would take a lot of wins from other teams and losses on their part, but I think it's just fascinating that these two teams that got off to such hot starts are now teams that we're worried about if they're even going to be able to make any noise in the playoffs.
I'll say my last word on the Rangers is, Lundqvist has done this his whole career. He steals games over a prolonged stretch, and then, he's human. Like any human being, he regresses in some stretches too, where, he's not a 970 goalie. No goalie is going to be a 970 goalie forever. He's not going to be a 956 goalie. But I mean, maybe he's in a bit of a slump right now, and they're in big trouble defensively anyway. So, he'll come back to that 940, 935, 940 pace probably in the next couple of weeks here. I mean, assuming he's not completely shot because of all the shots he's seeing. But, maybe he's in a bit of a slump, and the Rangers are in a bit of a slump. So he'll come back to that 940 pace at some point here, and the Rangers will figure it out, win some games. I think. That's what I think is going to happen. And then Montreal will get priced back, and everything will be okay. Now, while we're talking about Montreal, Dave, they've got a pretty big game coming up Friday. And they've got a pretty big opportunity coming up Friday because Canadian teams are undefeated in Winter Classics. Obviously, they've only played in one. Toronto's win over Detroit at the Big House a couple of years ago being the one and only game in which a Canadian team's been featured. Dave, both sides are scuffling entering. We just talked about Montreal's woes, but Boston has suddenly lost 3 straight. Obviously, they still have one more game Tuesday night against Ottawa before the Classic. Dave, what are your thoughts on this year's Winter Classic?
I think it's not too early to talk about this being a big 4-point game, or maybe a game that ends up 1 point in one direction or the other. Hopefully not.
8 points.
Yeah, but I do think that this is a game that both teams are gonna. No, sure, you want to win it because it's outside and there's a lot of people watching and yada yada. That's all great, but at the end of the day, it's 2 heated rivals that are jockeying for position in the playoffs, where they need this game, and it's a chance to beat a team, who's a rival in the division. Aside from the actual rivalry that the two teams have, which certainly you can make the case is the best in the entire sport.
Well, especially lately.
This is a big game. I mean, look, Boston has their injuries. Montreal will still be without Price. That you have to think, all right, who's going to step up in this game? Who's going to be the player who we don't expect? And we've seen it in quite a few Winter Classics where a guy scores and it's not someone we expect or whatever. But
Mike Rupp.
Yeah. Although Mike Rupp does have a tendency to do that over his career. But
sure, yeah.
It would be interesting to see, who's going to be the guy that steps up because again, Montreal struggled to score. I mean, Pat, I guess the question is, are we destined for a 2-1 game here? Just because maybe both teams can't get the scoring going, but I don't know.
I don't know. It's a good question. I think I like the matchup. Obviously, there's not a lot to like about the matchup. I think an underrated play with the matchup, Dave, is the fact that there's going to be a lot of people from Quebec. I mean, the trek from Quebec to Foxborough is not that far. I mean, when you consider that Quebec's the easternmost Canadian city with a hockey team, and Foxborough is pretty close. Probably no more than a few hours. Plus, Montreal fans travel from everywhere. They go to Brooklyn. They go to California. They'll trek long and far to see the Canadians. Both teams are scuffling at the moment. I still like Montreal better. Although I'll give Brett Connolly a lot of credit. That was a good addition for the Bruins in the offseason. Better than I thought, for sure. Boston's defense still, who knows? That'll be the only reason I would say that we wouldn't get a 2-1 game is because if we get a little, the teams get. Because Boston's been known to play a little fast and loose, especially this year, having allowed 94 goals this season, tied for second most, third most actually, in the Atlantic Division. Also, which interestingly enough makes them tied for third fewest in the Atlantic Division.
But they played less games too, so really they've been giving up more goals.
That's true. Yeah, 94 goals in 35 games only, which is do the math. It's roughly 3 a game. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for, here's what I'll say. We had Doc Emmerich on last year to talk about the matchup, and the matchup last year was not very good. The game was good. I'll give it that. But the matchup was not good, and the college football took over that reclaimed that day with the New Year's Six, and now you get a rivalry with two sexy teams, two very good teams for all their flaws. Boston's good. Montreal's on top of the division. They're both going to be in playoff spots when they start play Friday. The weather's going to be good. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be cold. It's going to be low 40s. It's going to feel like winter again. And, I mean, let's just hope that we don't get a sun glare delay like we did with the Stadium Series at Yankee Stadium. But I like the matchup a lot. I'm a fan. I really like when these teams get together, mostly because even with Milan Lucic's trade, these teams really don't like each other at all. And if Montreal fans goad the Bruins when they go to Montreal, and if there's a lot of Montreal fans, the Bruins are going to hear them, and it's going to get a little bit chippy, I would imagine, on the ice. We haven't really seen. And that's almost the irony of this game, is that the game always has such fanfare and such pageantry around it. But, Dave, we haven't really seen a knockdown, drag-out type of game in any of these outdoor games, really. The closest thing we got to it, I referenced it earlier, was Mike Rupp with the salute to Jaromir Jagr in the 2012 Classic. But with the Bruins and Canadiens, I mean, there's been a lot of bad blood between these two teams with the playoff series a couple of years ago, and just mostly with the games in Montreal. And I think the Classic really needs kind of some kind of tough, physical. I mean, I don't want to advocate for fighting, but let's go here. Let's see some, get some Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em stuff going on here.
I agree. Also, the fans in the stands are not going to be too pleased with each other.
No.
I'll tell you that right now. I mean, look, we all know people from the great city of Boston do have a short fuse. And, I've been up to Montreal for a couple of games. And, as much as we think that Canadians don't fight, they definitely fight when it comes to hockey. Mm-hmm. I was there for a Habs versus Leafs game a couple of years ago and saw things I never thought I would see in the great country of Canada. But
put some Labatt in them, and that all changes.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I think the fans are going to be charged up. I think we could see a game that really harkens back to the days when these two teams were playing and pretty much no one else in the league was. I think we're going to see an old school, maybe not, certainly there's not as much of the, in front of the net kind of, things as there used to be. Yeah. I don't think it's going to revert to that, but I think people will finish their checks. I think we'll get a fight here. I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, look, if you're around on New Year's Day, I know college football exists, and I'm not going to tell you not to watch college football, but you should tune in to watch this Winter Classic. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game.
Especially with Zach Ronaldo involved. So I agree. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see how it goes. Dave, we talk about the Atlantic Division because, Montreal is very good and very in it. And Boston's very good and in it. And the Senators are good too. And the Red Wings, all these original six and Canada stuff. But Dave, there's a non-traditional team that is kind of crashing the party at this point. The Florida Panthers have won 6 games in a row. They're doing it with defense. They've given up the fewest goals in the Atlantic Division and second fewest in the entire Eastern Conference. And they're young, and they're coming up. And we talked about them a lot last year. And, Dave, it's time to start talking about them again.
Yeah, I really think that this is not only a team that should be talked about, for people like us, but I think that they need to start getting the credit they deserve around the league for having some players that should be talked about, that should be considered the up-and-coming stars of this league. I know that there's not a lot of a fan base, but you know what, though? It might continue to grow because they're going to play good hockey. Yeah,
they're budding up. They had 15,000 people there for Monday night.
I mean,
Sunday night.
It's growing, and this is a team that I love their mix of veterans and young guys, where you have the Yagers and you have the Campbells, and even a guy like Jussi Jokinen who's been around. I mean, I'm not sure how vocal he tends to be, but certainly he's been around the block a little bit. And then you have all these kids. I mean, as you always point out, how the hell is Aaron Ekblad 19 years old? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Did the guy go back in time or something? Did he hit the odometer on his years or whatever? Because he's so wise beyond his years already. And the thing is, they're only going to get better. I've been watching them a lot. I've been making it a point to watch them two times a week or so, and it just looks like they're making like the subtle plays, the right plays every week. They're just getting more of that hockey sense that it takes to win games. Talent can win you games, but being talented and not working hard will lose you games. And I think that they're getting to the point where they can outwork teams, they can have more talented teams, and they can make the subtle plays that can win you games as well. And look, I think they have as good a chance as anyone to win this division.
I was around them a couple weeks. They were in New York a couple weeks ago, and they're a fun bunch, and they're a loose bunch. And I talked to Ekblad, and that's where I got that vibe from, because first off, he's got a full beard. So, I can't even I can hardly grow a goatee. And this guy's 19 years old and has a full beard. Secondly, you talk to him, it's like talking to your peer. And then you realize, he should be or he would be a sophomore in college, or maybe even a freshman in college where we're here in the United States. And then you watch him play, and it's like, this guy's so far above. I mean, I keep telling to you and everybody who cares to listen that, someone check this guy's birth certificate, because, are we sure he's 19? But no, you mentioned it and they mentioned it too when I brought it up. They have the young guys and the old guys, and there's not really much in between. There's a fair number of guys who are, born in the 90s. There are a few guys born in the 70s. And that's it, basically. So, you look at Huberdeau, you look at Barkov. Barkov's been fantastic this season, especially of late. He had that sweet shootout goal. And they're well coached. Gerard Gallant kind of reaches them. And last year I thought was a good experience for them, because, they made the move to get Jagr, and it was kind of one of those go for it moments for them, where they dealt a couple picks to the Devils to get Jagr. And, they kind of went for it, but they still held their prospects. They held the line financially. They didn't go crazy. But, Jagr, you mentioned him. He's been a huge influence on them. Jagr may not be he's not the most vocal guy in the room in terms of, rah-rah and getting loud. But everybody I talked to about him said, when he talks, they'll listen. And he keeps the room light. And there's a bunch of guys like that do that. Luongo's like that too. So, I mean, especially, from a goalie, goalies don't get that they don't get that role a whole lot, that leadership role, because they're a different breed to begin with. But Luongo, was a gold medal winning goaltender. 2 times he's won the gold, and 1 time he was the gold medal game winner. So, I mean, there's some pedigree there. And you look at the veterans, you mentioned Jokinen, and Jokinen is really the only veteran who hasn't won the cup on that team. They have Thornton, who won it in Boston. They have Campbell, who won it in Chicago. They have, Jagr, it's been 25 years almost since Jagr won the cup. And then, so you get those guys, Dave Bolland on conditioning stint, but he's won the cup with Chicago twice. So, there's guys who've been there and they're hungry to get back. And there's young guys like Huberdeau who are uber talented, pardon the pun. And I keep saying this to you, Dave, that the most remarkable thing to me about this is they're doing it without Nick Bjugstad, who's their number 1 center.
Yeah, and that's going to make them even better. It's funny. We've talked about this off air. We talked about this last year when you kind of were on this team before I think anyone else was. Mm-hmm. That it wasn't their year last year to make a trade. But I think we're in agreement now that this is a year to possibly make a trade. Whether it's, I don't know if they want to break the bank and give up a lot to get maybe, a first liner, but at least Stepniak from New Jersey. Yeah. Again, maybe, getting something else from the Devils again. again.
Yeah.
Would be interesting. To me, I just look at this team and I think that they are the epitome of where the league is going. That it's a young man's league, that it's a league that is changing in the type of skill set that a lot of these guys bring. That it's the speed game.
Yeah.
And as much as I think it's gonna, look, they're gonna have to, if they're gonna make the playoffs, they're gonna have to clinch a spot. And that when you get close, you grip the sticks too tightly.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have this veteran leadership is going to be a really big thing for them, because they've had guys who have won cups, who have won, hardware in one place or another. And I think that's going to go a long way. To me, they have a really, really nice mix right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they win the division. If I had to bet on it, I would say no, but I would not be surprised if they win this division.
I wouldn't be stunned either, just because here's the thing, that this is a playoff team. This is not going to be, in my estimation, this is you can make the case that there's 5 teams or 6 teams in that, for 5 spots, potentially for 5 spots. I would say probably for 5 spots, but I would say that Florida is one probably will finish in the top 3 in this division, and this division's tough. But they have the goaltending, they have the young defense. Riley Smith, watch him, because he's a real good, versatile player for them. That second line right winger in a move that wasn't really heralded this offseason. I just mentioned Brett Connolly, and Brett Connolly's been a great pickup for the Bruins, but his spot was made a little bit because of the Riley Smith deal. And why? And you know what the Riley Smith deal was, Dave?
No, I don't know who the other part of that was.
It was Riley Smith, or from Florida. Jimmy Hayes to Boston for Riley Smith and Mark Savard's contract. So it was one of those deals that we all hate, those salary dump deals, where the Panthers took on Mark Savard's dead money and got Riley Smith. And now Riley Smith, all of a sudden, you look at what he's done so far this year in Florida. He's been fantastic for them. He plays all situations. He's got 11 goals. He's +8. He's playing power play time. So, 20 points, good second line player. And I mean, what did they get? They traded Jimmy Hayes, who, who's fitting in Boston right now. But, Riley Smith, former 20-goal scorer, is on pace now to have, roughly that again. And, you throw one more guy, a 24-year-old too, by the way, in that mix. And all of a sudden, you get the opportunity, you throw – that takes the heat off of another guy. It takes the heat off of a guy like Dave Bolland, who has 5 points in 25 games. Or, it's why teams win. They win with depth, and they win with, young and good, like you said, fast and speedy guys. And Florida, and suddenly, Dave, by the way, they're starting to get fans, because they were 3rd worst in the NHL just 2 weeks ago in attendance, and now they're 4th worst in the league in attendance, climbing in the ranks. So, I mean, you look at how things run down in that area too. Well, or in sports to be anyway. Everybody loves a winner, and if the Panthers are going to keep playing well, they'll get more people, especially with the Heat being a little bit, maybe not as hot, if you will. Another pun.
Well,
I'm
I know. That is one thing I should point out with the fan base there is I know the Heat are in downtown Miami. The Florida Panthers are not. But remember how many fans were obsessed with the Miami Heat when they had LeBron. Mm-hmm. So I think that if they get a winner and they get a team that's really fun to watch and has young guys that are interesting, I think the fans will come. But speaking of another young team, this one out west, who will be playing an outdoor game of their own, the Colorado Avalanche are finally playing some good hockey under Patrick Waugh. The question becomes, is it sustainable? The easy answer is no. But when you look at this roster, the goaltending has been pretty good, and that was maybe where the weakest point was. This is a team that has talent. I mean, Nathan McKinnon is having another really good year. Matt Duchene has been sensational at times. Throw in the likes of Landeskog, Ginla, who's still producing. And their defense has been pretty good too. Tyson Barrie, Francois Beauchemin, the elder statesman there. They certainly have talent that can compare with a lot in the league. I mean, do you think that they have something here, or is it just a flash in the pan and they're going to come back down to earth?
Smart money says you can't win if you don't play with the puck. And, that's what drove everyone crazy with the Avs 2 years ago, was that, they were the statistical anomaly. They were the Flames of last year. They were the Devils thus far this year, or the first half, or the first 2 months Rangers in those terms, was they never play with the puck. So, they still have the worst Corsi for percentage in the league, but it's improved a little bit over the last, basically since middle of November. They've gone up about 3% in terms of Corsi for percentage. So they're not a downright disaster. They're getting some opportunity. Their shooting percentage is elevated a little bit, which always everyone points to in terms of Colorado because they don't play with the puck. They're fourth in on-ice shooting percentage according to War on Ice, trailing only the Rangers, Coyotes, and Capitals. But, Dave, let's be fair here. There are some world-class offensive players on this team. And that line of, you mentioned some of the guys that Patrick Waugh put Landeskog, McKinnon, and Duchene together, and that line dominated for basically, a couple, 6 weeks. So, I mean, there's some legit offensive talent on this team, of course. So you got Landeskog, you talk about McKinnon, who's playing a third line, like Ginla, Ginla's offensive game has tailed off here a little bit, but he's still 1 goal from 600 for his career, which, we both love Jarome Iginla. Good for him. Good guy, great guy, good, God bless him, deserves it. To answer your question, I'd say it's probably not sustainable, only because Semyon Varlamov's probably destined to fall back to earth here a little bit. Now, here's my problem with Varlamov. He's great in stretches. He was terrific 2 years ago. But, Dave, the guy is a roller coaster ride in goal, and you can't make the playoffs in the Western Conference, particularly in the Central Division, with even mediocre goaltending.
That's true, but we do know that he can get hot enough to carry them because he did it 2 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, to me, I like the fact that I think they've been better defensively also than we think. Beauchemin was a really good pickup for them, and Tyson Barrie. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you listeners have been able to watch a lot of him. Maybe if you're an Avs fan or you just happen to catch your team playing against them, but. Excuse me. Tyson Barrie is really, really good, and he's going to get even better. I mean, he's a guy that absolutely can control the game when he's out there. And it's this new age where these offensive defensemen are really like the catalyst for everything now. And he fits there, and he's a guy that can do a lot. And you throw in some of the other guys they have. I mean, even Nick Holden has been decent for them. Yeah. I would think that they, just because of who's ahead of them, they're going to have to really play exceedingly well to get there. I mean, it'd take a lot for them to pass a Nashville or a Minnesota. But they could make it interesting. I mean, could they have 92 points and miss the playoffs? Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at even last year, they were. But they bucked the trend, and they weren't very good last year at all, especially in the possession games. But they were still, I think they were in the high 80s in points. They were 90 points and finished last place. So even when this team is quote unquote bad or regresses, there's still talent there. So. Are they a 112-point team like they were 2 years ago? No. Are they a 90-point team? Probably, maybe. But it's a function of how good the Central Division is, and And I mean, Dave, we kind of talked about this a little bit off air about how the mold has been set where you need that offensive, minded, but you need your center, one of your two best centers to be a good two-way player. And a lot of people lampooned or lambasted the Carl Soderberg contract, but Carl Soderberg has 25 points in 37 games and plays a pretty sound and responsible defensive game. I mean, you can make the case that that's been a pretty decent acquisition. I know he's -4, but he's a pretty responsible player. And the question was going to be if he was going to put up points, and he's on pace for about a 55-point season.
Yeah, I mean, he's been impressive too. There's really not that many. I know their lines are interesting because they're always changing their lines around. I mean, if you go on Daily Faceoff, the way that I'm not sure because I haven't watched them in a couple days, but looking at their lines now, I mean, they're all over the place in terms of where they're playing people. And maybe that's Waugh just being Patrick Waugh
the top
and
9.
not being able to, just not being able to set it and forget it. Whatever the case may be. Look, I think this team could have a very good season and just be the odd man out in a really tough division because it's not going to be easy for them. But that being said, there's a lot of talent on this team that if they can make a couple of moves in the offseason, maybe even find more consistent goaltending, I think you could make the case that they're right there with the rest of them.
I'll throw a little shout out to Andreas Martinsson too, the second Norwegian-born player in the NHL right now, who's having a nice little who they really like a lot, and who's having a nice little season there. So keep your eye out on that guy.
No doubt. All right, Pat. So we're gonna have the new year here coming up. Obviously, people making their resolutions, whether it's going to the gym for the first 5 minutes of the year, which I'm not even going to make that resolution this year. I'm just going to say it's probably not going to happen, which shame on me for that. But before we leave here, give me one bold prediction for the year ahead, or at least the rest of the regular season before we get into the playoffs.
You want a bold prediction for the rest of the regular season, huh? All right. I'll give you one that I don't necessarily believe. How about Steven Stamkos going to get traded? I know Tampa Bay is finding it a little bit here, 5-4, won their last 10, but they're still 2 points out of a playoff spot, and both teams they're chasing have games in hand. And if this thing with him, if they continue to stay out of that spot, and this thing reaches ahead, come in the last week in February, that first week in March, there's probably going to be a market there for it. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe it's going to happen because Tampa Bay is clearly better without him. I'm sorry, Freudian slip. Tampa Bay is clearly better with him than without him. But you have to think that this contract thing is. We both know it's taking on a life of its own, and it's not going away anytime soon unless he signs a crazy extension in the next month and a half here, which it doesn't seem like he's about to. So, let's see if Stammer becomes a rental. Like I said, I don't believe it's going to happen, but you want crazy, that'll be something.
You know what? I could see it. I think it really comes down to where they are in the playoff situation. I think more so than anything to do with because I think he's gone. I just think that they will keep him as their own rental in a sense if they think they can make it, but
I'll give you one I believe, though, if you want to.
Sure, go for it.
I think John Tortorella is going to get fired in Columbus.
Wow.
Probably before the year end. If you've followed what's going on there, it's a whole lot of bad right now.
It is, but did we really expect it to be differently to go differently than that? I mean, really? Like, didn't we know this was coming with John Tortorella?
Yeah. No, I mean, we had to. I mean, but the whole thing with Scott Hartnell thus far, healthy scratch, and now Hartnell can't keep. I mean, it doesn't seem. I mean, this is him basically in a nutshell. It's Rex Ryan in football. He's entertaining. He's good for a soundbite, but the act wears thin, and he may last the rest of the season just because the black eye of having 3 head coaches in an NHL season. Like only the truly worst teams that have ever played have had that. And Columbus is not going to finish among the truly worst teams in NHL history. They already have 13 wins, which is more than some have had in entire seasons. But it feels like it doesn't feel like he's doing enough to change the on ice product, and it feels like he's alienating everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every day you hear a new quote of him pissing someone off, or something like that. Again, I think he's done. I think that they had hired him because they wanted to get tougher and better defensively, and they did it just based on his track record, and they didn't think about what had occurred at the end of his tenure in New York and Vancouver. Yeah, I mean, Vancouver was a disaster. How do you forget that? But for me, though, I'm going to go with my pick is going to be the Edmonton Oilers are going to make the playoffs. Yeah! I sure hope so. I mean, look, they're a couple points. They do have actually, no, if you want to consider it this way, they could be two theoretical points out just because Vancouver has one more game played to them, and Edmonton is currently 4 back. Look, if they're doing everything they're doing now, and then you add Connor McDavid into the mix, you have to think that they'll be better than where they are now. Can they be 4 or 5 points better down the stretch the rest of the way than what they've been with Connor McDavid, when they get him back? Sure they can. I think Edmonton sneaks in as a 3 seed and plays Calgary, and we get the Battle of Alberta. How great would that be?
That would be fantastic. Oh, man. You know what? I can see it, too. Just we've been talking about it both on air and off air, that McDavid's going to come back and just wheel them in, and that they've been better defensively, and that they found something in goal in Nielsen here a little bit. And that division is just a disaster. I mean, we're tired of talking about it at this point, but, I would, man, that would be fantastic. Get Calgary and Edmonton in the first round. I mean, that's basically why they realigned the way they did, right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic. I mean, that would be such a fun series to watch.
You don't think San Jose?
No, they've been so up and down for me. Don't get me wrong. I think San Jose could get hot and go some places because I do think they have the talent, but they play so many games that leave you scratching your head.
Yeah.
Like
Monday night.
Yeah. How is this the team that you just saw the night before where they go out and they win a game and they don't show up at all? And you're like, where is the middle ground even? Because it's been one polar opposite or the other.
Especially on home ice, it's baffling. They're 4-10 on home ice. I just can't believe. And Dave, we both agree that San Jose is the second most talented team in the division, right?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that, but they're not playing like it right now.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So man, that would be fantastic. Can you imagine what those games would be like? Because neither side. I mean, it'd be like It'd be like a playoff series out of the '80s, because neither side plays defense.
No.
Neither side's really good in goal. And yet, that would almost make the Pacific Division tolerable this year.
Yeah, that would be a great series. It would probably go 6 or 7. You're probably going to get the NHL would love it. They'd want to model the entire league after every 6 to 5 game that finishes there. It would be fun. It's probably a pipe dream, but hey, why not?
I agree with you though. Edmonton's going to get in because McDavid's going to wheel them there.
Yeah, as much as I said it tongue-in-cheek, I do think that he can make a difference. And if you want to talk about any team getting better, who's going to make a bigger difference for any of those teams than getting McDavid back? So I think there is a lot of truth to it as well.
Yeah, and I could even see the playoff series with Calgary just because we just keep waiting for Arizona to regress. Vancouver is going to fall off, and that makes it, 2 out of 3 teams to get in.
Yeah.
And Gaudreau has been fantastic for Calgary. He's carrying them. So yeah, I mean, I would be behind it, and I can see it.
Absolutely. All right, Pat. So have yourself a happy New Year, and to all the listeners out there, enjoy the New Year as well. Try to make it through the evening without having anything too crazy happens before you watch the Winter Classic. I know, there's always a great smattering of New Year's plans. For me, I'm taking it kind of easy, just going to a nice, kind of fancy cocktail party sort of thing. But,
good for you, Dave.
Should be good.
You deserve it, Dave.
I guess so. All right. So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner, and we will be back in 2016. Can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Cool.
Not bad.